You're on.
All right, so our main focus at this meeting is to go over the new bridge estimate. Did you get that in your email earlier, John?
I did, thank you.
Okay, yeah, so Liz worked really hard on it. So that's pretty much our final estimate that we're gonna have until basically the project's completed. And the only way we're gonna get better numbers is to actually price everything out and do all the work and then see what it is. But I think those numbers are pretty spot on as to what we're going to get and what we're going to have. But again, we won't know until we really send everything out to bid and do the work.
All right. So a couple questions. I think it's appropriate maybe to talk about just the cost. I was talking with members of the Bridge Committee, and certainly there's an aspect of this that's going to be fundraising. So the question is, because businesses are hurting in town. We saw them as, an avenue for fundraising, and obviously we're going to ask some of residents, but because of the particular nature of the world today, fundraising is going to be inevitably more difficult. So the question, we as a borough have to figure out is, if we can't fundraise as much as we would have hoped, is the borough, and can we get a collection of, or do people support the idea that we're going to move forward with the project and use other funds or more funds from the borough?
Well, that's like more of a general question. Oh, I'm sorry, what was it?
I just was going to say, we're at a point where it needs to be replaced. So if the fundraising doesn't work, you're going to have to figure that out. I don't know if it's necessarily.
I support that. I just want to, people on the committee were just wondering because originally what our vision for fundraising and especially the expectation for the cost were different. And it seemed like everyone's on board with the project, but I just feel like pragmatically and looking at it, there's going to be some aspect we as a borough are going to have to kick in more for this project if we're going to get it done at that cost.
Oh, crap.
Well, that's really that's really a council decision. That's not really a public works decision. But
no,
council,
I know.
Yeah.
just bringing up food for thought, and it's maybe something we want to talk about tonight, maybe, just to make sure there's a consensus moving forward.
That's not really something that's a consensus. That's more something that there'd have to be like a full motion and something would have to be written for, just because that's a lot of money. And the thing is, I don't really think that this whole project was deemed as public and private, and to say that, oh, we're not going to do the private part anymore because times are tough, which they are tough, but they're tough for the borough along with everybody else.
No, I'm not saying that we're not going to do the private. We have a plan to fundraise meeting next week. I just feel like the expectation of fundraising is going to be more difficult, and I envision us coming up short of whatever goal we end up setting.
Yeah, I think really what has to happen with that is they have to get started, because this has been a long time coming, and we can talk about all the challenges and concerns and issues, but if you never get started, you're never going to know. So it's kind of like our estimate, where our estimate's been back and forth. We really haven't been. Everybody's questioning this or that, and the only way you really know, since it's an estimate, is to go out and do it. So, I would say that committee would really have to get started, and then when we get an estimate of what it's going to be and start raising some money, then we could take it from there. I don't really think we make a decision on funding with that until we get an answer from the committee for their part of it.
Yeah, people are on board. Obviously, just kind of doing the rough estimate, talking with members of the committee, it seemed like, we have 70 from Borough Council. We have, is it 40 from the grant?
Yes, 40 from the grant.
So that's 110. And then we've already kind of fundraised 20 from, Bloomberg and some private donations that are kind of already in the account. So you're up to 130. We have a private donor who's going to give 35. So, it's kind of there. You see a whole of like 60, I guess.
The two questions, so I don't have all the updated numbers, but what's the new cost estimate, and then what's the projected fundraising lift?
Hold on one second, David. Let me open my other device here to give you the new official Quote, it is, for everything all said and done, it is 225 and change. Now 15 already has been spent by the borough for engineering, so cost needing to be laid out is around 210, and that's the estimate, and that also has like a 10% contingency in it. Now it
Right,
could
I'm gonna
be,
bid and we get what we get, right?
yeah, but if we don't bid it, like we won't know. So
Right. Oh, of
honestly,
course.
at this point, we should just move forward with it,
And see what happens.
put it out to bid, and then really see what happens with it. And the same thing with the fundraising. I think they should move forward and start fundraising. And when when there's no point to stop and go back and forth for another few weeks of fundraising, this, that, and all that kind of stuff. What are we going to do? And we should really just move forward and put it out to bid, get some answers, and take it from there. And at the same time, the committee should move forward and try to fundraise and see where they can get. And then, we can kind of, a few weeks from now, when we have numbers on that and they do a few weeks of asking around and seeing what they're doing with the fundraising, we can take it from there.
So question, this question for the committee, but in terms of the bid process, are we bidding out the individual parts of this project, or are we bidding out the whole project through a general contracting firm?
Well, we have
What do
to
you mean
bid out.
by parts?
Like
Yeah.
the crane work, for instance, like separately bidding out the crane work, or if there's landscaping, the fill and things like that, are those works going to be bid out separately, or is this a general?
I'll let Liz speak to that, but I mean, the bridge has to be bid out separate than like a GC that would do all the other stuff.
Yeah, so we went back to Gator Bridge to discuss with them the potentials of cost-saving measures, and they said that the borough could indeed purchase the bridge directly, which would minimize some of the costs associated with, the markup that a contractor would have put on it. And we also get a 10% municipal discount and all sorts of stuff. So the bridge portion is something that we would be doing internally, and they would coordinate with the contractor that we end up awarding the project to. But the rest of the project, we would most likely put it out to bid as one full thing, not piecemeal it out, especially because if things don't end up being, you have to take into account that some contractors are not going to bother with the project if it's not enough money. So when you piecemeal it out into little things like that, it sometimes becomes not worth their time and their effort to go at it.
Plus, I think you want one person responsible for everything. Just throw my 2 cents in there. I mean, you're going to buy the bridge, he's going to set it there. You want him to unload the bridge, put it together if it needs to be put together, which I believe it will. And then he's responsible for everything beyond that point. The downside with doing the bridge, the downside of buying the bridge separately is that if the contractor for some reason damages that bridge, now you're into a fight with him to get him to fix it and, when he's putting it together. So there is some downside, but we think we can save money by doing it. So that's why Liz is recommending we do that.
So, and this is a question, and again, I'm learning and kind of, how these projects are done. And just a question that came from the committee was, if we're going to do a general contractor will oversee the whole project, the question was, isn't that taking the job of like what the engineer usually does? If they're overseeing the whole project, aren't we paying the engineering firm to kind of oversee the project? And then now we're paying a general contractor to oversee it. Seemed like there was a sense that there was a redundancy.
So I can speak to that. So this is something normally that you would have an engineer oversee, and you would have a general contractor oversee, because the contractor is making sure one side of it's all done correctly, and the engineers making sure the other side's done correctly.
Okay.
So basically the way our projects typically work is that once something goes out to bid and it is awarded to a contractor, RVE then moves into the inspection side of it, where we make sure that we're on site during like pivotal moments. We're not there the whole time. So our overall costs associated will diminish significantly when it gets to the construction phase. We do leave it majorly up to the contractor or just there as oversight to make sure that it gets done correctly and to the plans that we created.
But we're
Okay.
not building the bridge, so you want to make sure that you have the contractors that responsible. There's, like Liz said, there's not enough moving pieces. You're not going to save that much money if you try to do the landscaping separately. I mean, if it comes down to a cost issue, you might just remove the landscape. When I say landscape, general grading, and try to do it another way, but you don't have a public works department, really. You just have one guy. So it's limited as to what you could do on your own and eliminate from the overall project scope. So you want to make sure one guy is responsible for everything. That way you're only arguing with one. When you have multiple prime contracts, engineering goes up because now you're trying to coordinate, make sure the general contractors coordinate with all the other subs. So it just, I mean, it ends up adding to your costs. So we're recommending one general contractor and then a separate bridge purchase. So.
Now, the other question I had was something like the site grading. That be something that someone could donate, their time, whether someone has a connection to, a landscaper or someone that does site grading? Is that something you could donate or volunteer your time for, that maybe, you can cut some of the cost of the project? I don't know if that's
Liz, you want a shot?
I would say that would require coordination with the contractor, because you would want to make sure that they're not causing difficulties for them to do their work. We could certainly, when we go through the bid process, potentially try to put into the scope of work and other things like that, that this is a public-private partnership and we are doing fundraising efforts, and there are aspects of this project we would like to utilize, volunteer efforts and things like that, and have that be upfront and see how the contractors respond to that. But I think you're jeopardizing complicating the project more than necessary and potentially creating room for error that then the contractor would then have to go in and fix, and then we would have a change order and other things like that. So I think RVE would advise against that route, but it's not impossible.
Okay, and again, this is just trying to think a little creatively, and especially, the fundraising efforts, which obviously the whole bridge committee is on board with, but just realizing, when the push happens and we come up short, are there creative ways? And that's kind of what the thinking was there. So I appreciate that response.
Yeah, and I mean, that was why when we went through this initially, we suggested the FRP option, because they have a disassembled option that they have had, like Boy Scouts put together the bridges before, that was one of the ways that we were hoping to have cost savings when it came to the labor and installation of the bridge. But as we all know, we have wound up with the aluminum option, and so that limits cost savings on the installation side.
Okay, but the same argument would hold, though, with putting the bridge together, that, if you had Boy Scouts do it, it could be on the hook. And
usually with the aluminum sort of stuff, I don't think that's something would be as applicable. Like the FRP option, it's kind of like Legos to a degree.
Yeah, the FRP comes as like kind of like an IKEA set, and it gets put together on the site, where the aluminum bridge comes in one piece, and then we might have to install the decking ourselves. But the bridge frame itself is going to be one piece.
Okay. All right.
So if I could just take a little high-level stab at all this. What we're really talking about doing here is closing a fundraising gap. And, we're not going to achieve that by cutting costs, right? So there might be some things where, like, around the margins, we save a little here, we save a little there. But, right, we have this number that we need to make up, and we're not going to get there by making the project cheaper. So either the fundraising efforts need to get more aggressive, or the borough is going to have to take a look at what project are we going to cut on the other side to put that money here, right? But that's the fundamental question that's sort of in front of us, right? Because I know that, and we'll talk about it as a full council tonight, but the question is, if the borough is being asked to put in another $60,000, it's sort of like, where is that coming from? so what I would like to see from the committee is a commitment to a fundraising number. And I know it's hard to project and it's hard to say we're going to raise this much. But I think the bridge committee needs to come to a number and say, this is what we're going to raise.
We're meeting next week. So that's definitely reasonable. And like I said, our, just initial discussions with some members of the committee seem like, the high bar is like 50,000, and certainly that would be, something that may be within reach. And that's just preliminary, but I can bring up to the rest of the committee and say, this is what it seems like 60 is probably what we need based on just, how much we have and how much, we can count on from fundraising right now. So about 60 additional dollars we'll have to fundraise on top of what we kind of already have committed to fund, people have already committed. So, which is a big, if you think about the grand scope of it, at the end of the day, we're talking, if we raise an additional 50 from already the 55 we've had in, that would be a private entity raising $105,000 of the project, which is a huge number.
It would be nearly half.
Yeah, and that's a big number to privately fundraise. So I'm just saying that the committee's, and like I said, there's one member who's, pledged a considerable amount. We've had some, from businesses and things like that, I know there's a Bloomberg fund that some people have given through. So, there's already some efforts being taken place at this stage.
Yeah, quick question, if I could.
Sure.
Yeah, just a little bit of a concern. If I were a contractor, I cannot imagine them taking on the liability of volunteers working. Many times, they just say, no, we can't do it as much as we want to. We cannot have volunteers working on our site. So what I might suggest or offer up is that in our contract, we ask the contractor to maybe consider local contractors, guys who are in the area, to do landscaping rather than take somebody from Harrisburg or from Philadelphia or Morristown or wherever. Maybe we could ask them to look for local contractors to do the work. Not only would they, they might be able to put up a little advertising sign while they're doing the work as well. And number two, the fundraising, when is that going to take place, the fundraising meeting?
Next week. We haven't set a time yet, but next week is tentatively, we're going to look at people's schedules.
Yeah, I'd be kind of curious to sit in if I could. But there was some talk about taking the old bridge, and because it was made of a rather specialized wood from Africa, that we could take those pieces and auction them off or sell them off and allow, either artisans come down from New Hope or wherever and take this wood and make it into something that we can distribute around the borough. Maybe turn into park benches. Maybe some residents might want to buy some of this wood and make a picnic table out back. And you can, that could be fundraising.
Interesting. It's a good point.
But it's, I'll get the name of the wood for you, but it's an extremely dense hardwood from Africa. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll let you know when the meeting time is too.
Yeah, and we'll definitely have to include some language then in the bid package that the old bridge needs to be protected in a way that you can salvage all of that, so that when they're removing it, they don't just destroy it.
Well, I'm pretty sure I'm not sure actually how they'll do it. They'll probably just, the crane that they use to put the new one in, they'll probably just lift it up. I don't know how much, in my experience with all the recommendations from everybody, which is great. The more complicated we make this big package, the more expensive it's going to be. In all fairness, I totally get, like, you want to try to save money and cut costs, and I do as much as possible, but the more complicated and the more different requirements that we put in this bid package, the more they're going to come back with. We might be best to save, like, if we could save some money at the end to do all the finished landscape work ourselves, and we can leave that out of the specs. That would probably cut some costs out of it, because that's something that privately we can do. We can just have a Saturday where we all go out there and do finished landscaping and everything. But the more complicated we write this bid package up, the higher that estimate's going to come in.
All right, sounds good. I mean, I certainly met your expertise is certainly warranted, and if you think it's best to proceed with the simplicity, and I mean, it was a good idea, but you're right, it's probably best just to keep it simple. And
so I mean, to save money, we definitely could leave off the requirements for like the finished landscaping and everything. We can leave that all off, because that's definitely something we can do ourselves as a group, or we could even have Ken come in, our public works contractor, and take care of that, which we might save some costs. But and I'm all for the saving the wood and everything, but if it's going to cost more money, I'm not for it. I know one thing, they'll definitely take it out and they'll definitely put the wood on the side, so we could work something out after the bid comes in to figure out how we're going to deal with that. But to put something in like a bid package for trying to anyway micromanage a contractor, they're going to raise their price. Or if you tell them we want to save this large piece of wood that's on there, they're going to raise their price. If after the bid comes in, you say, hey, when you take the bridge off, just put it aside, our guys are going to cut it up or do something, they're not going to care. But if you put it in the requirements before, any requirement automatically adds cost.
I'm agreeing with what you're saying. And the other thing is, what we don't want to happen is us thinking that we have an avenue of someone's going to come take pieces of this bridge. It's a big bridge. So you don't want it to become an eyesore where it's just sitting on the towpath for months and months and months or years waiting for people to come and take the pieces. So we got to spell out to the contractor what we want done with it, which would be, one suggestion is to totally remove the bridge and dispose of it. It's on him, whatever he wants to do with it. And then work out the agreement after the bid that says basically, okay, can you save a section of it, just put it over here in the corner? We know a group that wants the wood in particular, rather than just, if we don't tell them what to do with it, you may end up with an eyesore in the long run. So, and then you have to dispose of it and get it cut up, and it could be your volunteer stuff. And as far as the other thing about the landscaping, we can put that all in as an alternate bid.
Mm-hmm.
And then if the bids don't come in good and Ken decides that he can do it for a lot cheaper, then,
We don't award that part.
you just don't award that portion, and you get Ken to do it or volunteers to do it. So it's a good suggestion.
Well, do we know whether this 225,000 includes removal and disposal of the bridge, or is that a separate item that's going to be added on later?
No, that's supposed to include
So it's already in there.
Yep. Yeah, there's a line item that's clearing site bridge, and it's 12,000.
All right. So do we have any other discussions or any topics anybody'd like to discuss before we call it a meeting?
Yeah, I think it might be worth talking about the phase 2 sidewalk project in this forum versus in the public meeting. So basically, you all still need to make a decision about how we want to move forward with the potential grant applications in the near future, versus whether or not you're going to account for some of this project in the credit line that the borough might be taking out. But the deadline for the DZD MTF grant has been extended to September 30th, 2020. And what my current recommendation is that we have often found that shovel-ready projects do much better in the grant process in being awarded especially higher amounts. And since there's already some funding available towards this effort, we think it would be prudent to give us the green light to move forward with the design aspect of the project. Since you guys want this to happen anyways, I don't really see any harm in doing that. And then we just kind of keep plugging away at trying to secure funding to do the construction side of it. Like, I think through the $125,000 we already got from the DCED MTF grant last year, that could cover the majority almost or all of the engineering design work that is needed to get the permits and to do all of that and be in a place to hit up construction once the rest of the funding's secured.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's best, and during your report, if you go over that, and I can make a motion towards that, so we can just get that rolling. Because I would prefer to wait out the grants than to take a loan and get an answer for there. But even if we're doing grants or if we're doing funding from the borough, either way, all that work's still going to have to be done. So it might as well be done now before we put the grants in. So when we do put the grants in, they can see that we have everything ready and going for it.
Yeah, it certainly makes them much more attractive. So we've got the DCD one that's due in September, and then the PennDOT MTF grant hasn't opened up the next round yet. But in my conversations with them in the process of trying to close out the phase one, everybody has been saying, well, as soon as you close that one out and you no longer have an active project, that boosts you in the line to receive another grant. So it seems like that possibly was working against us in the last 2 rounds that we submitted for and were not awarded.
Yeah. So we are in the middle of closing out the phase one, though, correct? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Great. Any thoughts, John?
Yeah, when is that going to be closed out?
It kind of depends on PennDOT. Basically, they are trying to make a decision on if we need to go through a formal scope of change process, because we didn't go all the way out to Cold Springs, and that was what the grant was awarded for. As you all know, we had to stop at Wayfaring due to some unforeseen changes in the scope with regards to the drainage that was needed and other costs that ended up being higher than when we applied for the grant and had that grant agreement drawn up. So right now, I'm working with Paula to prove to them that the borough did indeed expend the 30% that they committed to spending, even though we didn't finish out the whole scope of the project. So either they're going to accept that when we give them that proof, and then they'll move forward and can close everything out, or we're going to have to do a little bit more paperwork with that scope of change and move forward. So
Excuse me.
David Bertina is the person that kind of makes that call, and he was on vacation, but he's back now. So hopefully we'll get an answer soon.
All right. And any word on the drainage grant that we put in? Is that?
So the PA sewer small water, we're not going to hear about that until September. They keep pushing back when they're hosting their meeting. So initially it was supposed to be February, and then it got pushed to July, and now it just got pushed to September.
All right.
All right. Awesome. All right. Well, I think that's everything. The Greenlight Go, we're kind of just waiting on, right? So.
Yeah, we're just waiting on the master arm. They've finished and completed everything else that they could do. The last I was told is that the master arm is supposed to show up in July, and they haven't heard anything suggesting that there'll be a delay from that. So hopefully by the end of July, we'll be done with that project.
All right. That would be awesome. All right. Well, great. Anybody have a question? Yep. All right. So I will call this Public Works meeting to a close, and I'll see everybody that's coming back at 7:30 for the regular council meeting.
All right. Thank you.
Sounds
Hold
good.
on, everybody.
See you all then.
Paula, Caroline canceled general government, right? Okay. All right. See you at 7:30.
Okay.